Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today we're doing something pretty different. Today, we're going to talk about World of Warcraft. No, I'm not making the switch, and I'll probably bring up why periodically throughout this video. But World of Warcraft is getting a new feature that I think Final Fantasy XIV players should be keeping an eye on and should be openly discussing. And that is player housing. Yeah, for a long time, Final Fantasy XIV seemed to have the edge in a lot of social aspects, despite the fact that our friends list is duct taped together and has been for the past decade. But it seemed like things like player housing and general social function was a little bit more fleshed out in our game. But while Final Fantasy XIV has kind of been resting on its laurels with a lot of those functionalities, World of Warcraft has been building up its other features that aren't just its Mythic Plus or its endgame rating or its PvP, and this is a prime example of that. So I've seen a few snippets of what this blog post describing it is online, but I have yet to read the blog post in its entirety. So that's what we're going to be doing here, and I am going to be contrasting the things that World of Warcraft is doing to Final Fantasy XIV to see what Final Fantasy XIV should be learning, or if there's maybe something that has me nervous about the World of Warcraft implementation of it. Just because they're adding player housing doesn't automatically mean it will be good, but I'm fairly optimistic about it coming from the Blizzard devs for this feature. They probably have a pretty good idea of what people want when it comes to player housing. So the construction of the new housing system in Azeroth is underway, and we're taking you behind the scenes to give you an early look at what the housing development team has been working on. Watch your step and don't mind the dust. Yeah, I recall this getting announced sometime in the past, probably at a BlizzCon for the current expansion, or going over details for the current expansion, something of the sort. But this is our first real kind of deep dive into seeing it. Welcome home, adventurers. We're excited to kick off our first look at housing in World of Warcraft and share some of our philosophies and plans for this new feature with you. First up, we're focusing on the high-level design pillars for housing, as well as talking about a few key areas of housing as we lay the foundation for future discussions. Reminder for anyone who isn't too technically inclined, high-level means basically the basics. You know, you're not going deep into the inner workings of everything. You just want it to be something surface level that a lot of people can understand. So they're not going to be getting too much into the nitty-gritty with this one. Fortifying housing with pillars. That's a pun. When developing such a large new feature, it's useful to start by defining its pillars. They help the development team get on the same page before we start building, as well as providing a guiding light when making decisions and identifying priorities. All right, this is basically fluff. We need to get into the actual bits and pieces here. Okay, the three pillars of housing. Boundless self-expression. Our highest priority is to allow players to build a house that shows off their personal taste or their war bands, acts as a desired backdrop for role-playing, or just allows players to create something in a flight of fancy. The toolset should be easy enough for someone with no 3D experience to be comfortable with and use successfully, but it should also be powerful enough that players can surprise us with their creations or drill down to get the tiniest details just right. The that's not pronounced gamut, is it? I'll say gamut anyway. The gamut of decor options spans not just the cultures of Azeroth, but the many expansions of World of Warcraft as well. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty standard. If your housing doesn't allow for self-expression, I mean, what's the point? Unless, of course, you know, there's functions like, you know, 14 has with submarines, but realistically, that should be the first pillar. 2, deeply social. Definitely should be the second pillar. World of Warcraft is more fun with other players. Sometimes. And the housing should be no different. While players can enjoy the housing purely on their own, its systems are designed at a fundamental level to encourage interacting, playing, and progressing with friends, neighbors, guilds, and the wider community in a meaningful way. Yeah, I mean, that's, again, pretty standard stuff. A long-lasting journey. Housing is built as an evergreen addition to the game, with its own roadmap reaching across multiple patches and into future expansions. Housing isn't something players should expect to finish, but instead continually look forward to the next housing release, be it new content or systems. This is a long-term commitment for us developers that offer player rewards. I'd say these are all pretty in line with Final Fantasy XIV's same pillars, and I don't think you can do housing successfully with a separate set of pillars than these. I mean, deeply social, having self-expression, and gradually updated over patches. Yeah, nobody wants to invest in something that will never see an update. And housing, above all else, is, especially as a form of self-expression and a social feature, something that needs to be constantly updated. So I'd say both games pretty much understand the fundamentals on this level. So let's get into more of the other bits. Like I said, I've seen a few snippets, so I know some of the things that are going to be coming up, but I think it's important to read all of this and see if I'm on the same page as them. One more important note, even though it's not an explicit pillar, wide adoption is a primary consideration for us as well. Most players should want a house in Azeroth, and if a player wants a house in Azeroth, they can have a house in Azeroth. Furthermore, housing is being designed to scale with the player's interest. If someone wants to spend dozens of hours a week on their house, that's great. If they're only interested in coming and going once or twice a month, that's great too. So that would read as no limited housing. Now, I don't know if they expand on this later, but I mean, that's point for World of Warcraft. If everyone can have a house, then of course, every Final Fantasy XIV player looks at it and goes, yeah, everyone can have a house, can't they? Huh? I mean, even Final Fantasy XIV Mobile seems to be the case where everyone is going to be able to have a house. It's really just Final Fantasy XIV Retail falling behind. It has been a commonly criticized thing. It's no secret to Final Fantasy XIV players. And every time another game does something like this, it really makes Final Fantasy XIV players scratch their heads. I don't really think you can go, oh, Spaghetti Kodo game built on engine from however many years ago, because if they really want to make something like this happen, I can't help but feel like the dev team really could make it happen, even if, yes, it may require quite a bit of resources because of any technical debt they may have gained. I think they can overcome that technical debt, and I think that the pressure is going to continually be on Square Enix to make that innovation. Yes, we are expecting some housing updates, but it is not anything on the scale of everyone being able to get a house. It's just everyone with a house being able to modify the interior size, which, while nice, still doesn't address one of the core issues that it seems World of Warcraft is going to make sure is not a core issue right from the get-go. Zoning in on home. We've seen a lot of discussion and speculation from the community on where players will be able to have houses. We decided early on that there would be 2 housing zones available at launch, one for Alliance, one for Horde. Makes sense. With more possible places to live in the future. The Alliance zone takes inspiration from Elwynn Forest with touches of Westwall and Duskwood, and the Hordes is inspired by Durotar, its coastlines, and Ashara? That's such a weird combination for me. I kind of get touches of Westfall and Duskwood. I have played World of Warcraft, just so you know. Played it for years. But Durotar and Ashara? I mean, even if it's the coastline, I don't know. For some reason, for me, I mean, quite frankly, I wouldn't want to live in a Durotar-looking area to begin with. So I'm already more drawn to the Elwynn Forest-inspired area with Westfall and Duskwood. So, but that's just personal taste. I just wouldn't want to live in it. That doesn't matter if I'm Horde. I just wouldn't want to live in Durotar. So there are 2 main reasons for this. One, having many housing zones conflicts with the second pillar of design that a feature is deeply social. In a world where players can live in many different zones, they become increasingly spread out, and even with aggressive sharding, the chance of seeing other players, much less interacting with them, drops quickly. So sharding basically meaning like, even if you have like, basically it's like instances in a sense, is the easiest way to describe it. But this is actually a very good point, and I think a point that they should probably... Here's the problem, is that players really do just want to live where they want to live. And so it's inevitable, I think, that people go, oh, we want to live there. I want to live in this area. I want to live in an area that looks like this. People want to live where they want to live. And I think that to some capacity, the social aspect kind of comes second to that kind of personal desire to... Only, I swear, I hear Ivy yowling off in the other room. Ivy, I'm recording right now. So while I agree with them that it kind of goes against the deeply social thing, I think it's just inevitable that players want more. It's just but it is a smart way to start the design, because if they start with this in mind, with everyone kind of being closer together and seeing how important that second pillar is, then if the second pillar doesn't seem as important to people based on your data, you can expand on it later without really much concern. So right decision to begin with, but they're right, it is inevitable that people will want more zones to actually live in. To putting it bluntly, zones are a lot of work. Yeah, that's fair. I almost feel like the reasons are realistically switched, but no, they're right. We'd much rather do a great job with a small number of zones than do a passable job on a large number, or come up with solutions that take the player out of the world into their own personal instance of a zone, which I think a lot of people actually are okay with. That's the big thing. Even though we play MMOs, massively multiplayer online, the number of people who really like to keep to themselves outside of deliberate group activities is fairly high, it feels like nowadays. So It's pretty interesting because I bet you some people would a lot of people actually would be okay with the idea of their own personal instance of a zone. But then again, you know, still, I think they should see how that core pillar actually works first. We chose these as our starting points because of how iconic they are for their respective factions and how much they feel like home to so many players already. Yeah, I mean, I agree still. Like, regardless of the fact that I can find kind of flaws in that, they're right. Even, like, I don't know, I guess it really depends on how it's designed. Because, yeah, it's just a matter of waiting and seeing. Because any sort of counterpoint you have to this just comes down to seeing the execution first. Ivy, I'm just recording. She's zooming. Like, yeah? What? See, look, she wants housing. Where do you want housing? Do you want it in Duratar or do you want it in Elwyn Forest? Which one? I don't think meow is an answer. All right. I'm really curious to see how just the 2 zones works. But regardless, it's not like they should release like 5 zones to start with or even 3 zones to start with. I think they've got the right idea. We're excited for what we'll be able to accomplish with 2 zones. We'll be sharing more what this means in future updates. Okay, outfitting your home. Similarly, there have been discussions in the community on whether housing will be pay to play or /win or not. Be a weird thing for housing to be, along with other conversations around real world money. Oh, okay, that's what they mean. We've been very aligned with our internal conversations that housing is designed to be primarily player first and not revenue first. Housing will offer hundreds and hundreds of decorations and housing customizations via in-game rewards, but will also offer a smaller number of items in the cash shop. So this is really kind of a big thing to keep an eye on, because it can start that way, but a lot of the times monetization with features starts as something really kind of minor, and then just over time, the sheer volume that gets added becomes egregious. And then all the things that players want most. And I think Blizzard does have kind of a weird reputation when it comes to cash shop items. When I think of the majority of discourses around the game's items, they do often revolve around their decision to do things with cash shop items. I think they also had a recent thing where they like had a cash shop item and then it pretty quickly after became free via like watching Twitch streams or something. There was some weird discourse. I'm probably wrong about that. So this is, I think, the number one thing people are going to keep their eyes on, and rightfully so. But even still, even if there's some discourse around that, the core functionality and feature working should be at the top of everyone's thought list. This is comparable to how transmogs and pets are currently handled in-game versus the shop. We want to allow players to have as many options as possible for creating their perfect home in Azeroth. Yeah. So, no surprise there. That's just one of those things we might occasionally see some discourse around, but the number of in-game available options is hopefully one that players like. It's not even just about the amount of options. They have to be options players like. And hopefully all of the best options don't eventually come from the cash shop, because that's just not a good idea in any game. A home for everyone. There we go. As part of the focus of wide adoption, we want to ensure that housing is available to everyone. If you want a house, you can have a house. No exorbitant requirements or high purchase costs, no lot. Yo, I wish I had some gauntlets to throw on right now, because Blizzard literally looked at Final Fantasy XIV and went, your move. And no onerous upkeep. And if your subscription lapses, don't worry, your house doesn't get repossessed. Dude, they literally hard looked at Final Fantasy XIV with this section right here, because all of those are major complaints. How much gil it costs, the actual lottery for obtaining it, needing to keep your subscription going. Yeah, Blizzard's trying to one-up them on every front and not even try to be coy about it. Your houses are also shared amongst your warband with your different characters, being able to come and go as you see fit. So all of your alts also have access to your house. Your orc character can hang out in your alliance house without a problem. Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. Housing rewards are also shared across your warband, so you'll be able to use your decor collection no matter which character earns it. Yeah, that's all ups. Final Fantasy XIV has... its systems have been like, so for example, the lottery, the purchase costs, all of that stuff is partially because of the limited capacity of housing. So they try to kind of find these methods of creating like a minor to major gatekeeping feature so that players don't try to buy out whole wards. Not that that's worked in some cases, and it's quite a few cases. And of course, tying it to your subscription, because it's limited, they don't want you having a house forever. So a lot of this still kind of comes back to the fact that housing is limited in 14. If housing became unlimited in 14, then I would imagine they would, A, do away with lotteries. What would be the point? B, you probably wouldn't need to keep your house, similar to apartments. You don't need to keep your house. You don't need to keep your subscription to keep your house, similar to apartments, which, you know, you don't need to keep a subscription to keep your apartment because they're unlimited and there's so many of them. And no I'd imagine all that would go away. So your move, Square, your move. And also the alt thing. The alt thing is huge too. It's so annoying trying to do I get it. 14 is a game built with the idea you could do everything on a single character. Whereas WoW is a game that has to be built with alts in mind because every character realistically does maximum of 3 things, you know, whatever spec they're going within their individual class. So they needs to be built around this more. But that to me is not a reason why you would still not make the effort. Because not like alts don't exist in 14. So there you go. Another point for World of Warcraft. Furthermore, it's not just warbands that cross factional lines, but friendships as well. So you're able to live in or visit your friends or guildmates' house and their neighborhoods with minimal restrictions. Minimal. While it's not possible for your human character to buy a house in a horde zone, your troll character in the same warband can. And then your human can use... Oh, so the only restriction is just like you couldn't outright buy it with the opposite faction. I mean, maybe there's another restriction. That's just the example they're using, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, that's literally points. Like, everything's better about that. Everything's better about the World of Warcraft housing implementation by that description. Before we go, we want to mention the concept of neighborhoods as a small tease. Houses are organized into roughly 50 plot neighborhoods, letting players live next to each other, work together, and share in the rewards of being part of a neighborhood. Neighborhoods are instant but crucially persistent, so your neighbors can be your neighbors for years to come, or until one of you moves. Neighborhoods can also come in 2 flavors. Public neighborhoods, which the game servers are responsible for creating as needed and maintaining. Private neighborhoods created by groups of friends or guilds to inhabit, progress, and customize together. So while an individual player can have a house, a community can have a neighborhood. It's just an initial look at the blueprint we've been working on for housing. There's a lot more ground to cover and details to get into, and we look forward to your thoughts and feedback as we share more articles in the future. This is a really neat way of doing things, and again, representative of the fact that there's not a limited number of housing. In that you could just choose to kind of, it's almost like like looking for a raid. It's like LFR versus like having a guild. But the housing equivalent of it. Now I can't help but notice that they say share in the rewards of being part of a neighborhood. So I think they're implying that housing, there will be a reason to participate in events in your neighborhood in some capacity, because I mean that's fine. I guess I'm indifferent about the prospect of doing that. Pugging neighborhood objectives, probably not as bad as pugging other things. And the private neighborhoods are really cool, especially for any sort of guild, content creator, anyone doing anything at all. Honestly, so here's the thing with me. I mentioned at the beginning about how I wasn't swapping to WoW, and it's because housing is not a core functionality that makes me want to keep a sub to anything. I'm never like, I'm only like, even with 14, if I bought a house and I just didn't want to subscribe, I would be like, well, I guess I'm losing the house then. Like, I wouldn't let me just log in once every 43 days or whatever to keep it before the 45th day rolls. I wouldn't care. So in the same breath, housing in WoW wouldn't make me want to play WoW. I still just don't want to do the rest of the core activities that the game offers. It's just not of interest to me. And housing doesn't sell me on that. But that's me. Who cares? This isn't about me. This is about the general thing that they are building here and what we have seen a lot of people do like and want. So, while this is not indicative of implementation being good, this article, it is indication of intent for it to be good. They are ticking all the boxes. They're clearly making callouts to the way that very specifically Final Fantasy XIV handles their housing. It's definitely calling out, because no other game really does housing like 14 does, even if they have it. those are just, they just understand that when people think player housing, they more often think of 14 than most other games. So yeah, this is all either just neutral, like, yeah, of course, like they would say that because why wouldn't they? Because that's like common sense, like this stuff, but also just plus, 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 plus. And again, it's really important that Final Fantasy 14 players pay attention to this, because right now, or I guess for however long, players have expressed wanting housing to just kind of be torn down and done again. Now, they don't want to lose their house necessarily, but I think if you told every player, hey, the entire housing system is being ripped up, all of your guilds being refunded, and then everyone can do housing in a way that's similar to what's being presented here, I honestly don't think anyone would care, because it's not like they would actually lose and need to like lottery for another house. They would just pick up whatever house they want because of the way that it's, you know, the way that the game is built. I don't think anyone would be against that. I'd be shocked if anyone was, because why would you just not want everyone to be able to have a house? Like, if I could have a house and didn't need to be maintained, I would just get the house. Like, I probably wouldn't do anything with it, because again, it's just not an interest to me. But you should still have it that way. And we are seeing that a lot of players are just kind of getting to the point where the shortcomings are not acceptable regardless of what reason might be given. Because we're all fairly confident that the team can absolutely overcome these things should they actually put the time and effort into it. So I feel like the pressure is on 14 now in more ways than it previously was before. Now, this isn't coming anytime soon in WoW. It's something they're still working on. All of the artwork is simply artwork. None of it's like in-game renders or anything past sort of their discussions and what their intents are. No actual like previews. It's just kind of like an early article of something that's to come way in the future. But 14 is now facing kind of a scheduling problem with the way that its content is structured and the way that its content releases are structured. And now, if this is encroaching on it, it is going to be a genuine concern, more so than other things were, because people want to be able to access the things in the game whenever they want. And if they can't, they may not want to chill around and wait. They might literally just pay a WoW subscription for housing, and then maybe go, well, why do I play the 14 subscription? It's a genuine thing. The point is, Blizzard has had a lot of learning and adapting to do. 14 was doing a lot of things WoW wasn't doing, and WoW has, over the years, gradually kind of evolved and grown and taken those things and said, we can do things for our game that we weren't doing before, and I think this is kind of the pinnacle of it. So while it may not be of particular interest to me, I wanted to share it with all of you because it is definitely something to keep an eye on. I kind of want to do like a show on the channel where I bring on one of my WoW buddies and we just talk news about both games to compare and contrast the way that things are being done. Maybe even just talk about other games that are coming out, other MMOs, other experiences, thoughts, expectations, whatnot. Like, I kind of want to do that. I have a handful of WoW buddies I could call on for this. One in particular that comes to mind that we could probably have some pretty good discussions about this kind of stuff that brings a lot more insight and knowledge from someone firsthand with WoW and someone firsthand with 14 with a lot more experience leaning to one than the other from each that can have some pretty good discussions about this stuff. So, yeah, just felt like this was worth sharing with my community here on the YouTube. That being said, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget, on the 14 side, we do have a live letter this week. We do expect a housing feature to be talked about, at least briefly, the interior size change thing that we're going to be getting, where you, regardless of the size of your exterior house, you can change the size of the interior for a cost, which again, WoW's not doing the cost difference. And it doesn't matter if anything like an interior change because they can just buy whatever they want in WoW. Like, who knows? We don't even know about different house sizes, styles, anything like that. We don't even know about that yet. But I'm sure we'll learn about it in the near future. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. And until then, take care.